This is Casey with LowCostMacs.com, and today we're taking a look at the MacBook Air 13-inch. This is the fastest MacBook Air you can get right now, released in July 2012, with a 2 GHz dual-core Ivy Bridge i7 processor. This also comes with 8 gigs of RAM, and this model has a 256 GB solid-state drive. First thing we'll do is take a look at the design of this machine. It's very classic Apple, very sleek, and the design actually hasn't changed much at all since the first iteration of the MacBook Air. The only things that have changed is the lack of a trackpad button, the integrated power button in the function key row, and the black display hinge. If we take a look at the display bezel, you'll see that it's about an inch thick, which is 2 times thicker than the display bezel in the anti-glare 15 and 17-inch MacBook Pros. I actually prefer the smaller display bezel as I think it is more proportional with the machine, but this display does still have a 1440 by 900 pixel resolution, which is one of the most pixel-dense 13-inch displays on the market. This MacBook comes with a full-size keyboard, and unlike the 11-inch MacBook Air, there are no half-size function keys. You got all full-size keys on the entire keyboard. This keyboard is backlit, which is a fantastic feature, and it's also one of the best keyboards on the market in my opinion. If you like writing, typing, emailing, or Facebooking, you're absolutely going to love this keyboard as it serves its purpose very well. The trackpad on the 13-inch MacBook Air is the exact same size as it is on the 17-inch MacBook Pro, so it's full size, very responsive, and the absolute best trackpad on the market. The MacBook Air speakers get very loud with no distortion. However, the lack of low end takes away from the fullness of sound. Movies and music won't immerse you like a 17-inch MacBook Pro speakers or headphones will, but the whole room will hear what's going on. The 2011 MacBook Air 13-inch with a 1.7 GHz Core i5 processor scored 5860 on Geekbench, so the 2012 gains a 130% increase at 7644. Let's take a look at how the MacBook Air fared on the Cinebench test. It received 19.26 frames per second on the OpenGL test and 2.97 points on the CPU test. Running a quick speed test, you can see that the write time is right under 400 megabytes per second, and the read time is just at about 450 megabytes per second. What that means for you is you're going to have extremely quick boot up times, extremely quick shutdown, sleep and wake from sleep, and you won't be waiting around for your applications to load, that's for sure. We're now running a speed test on a USB 3 Seagate Backup Plus. As you can see, these speeds are a little bit less than optimal. We're getting about 60 megabytes per second read and write time. Now if we take a look at some results I've gotten on my 17-inch MacBook Pro, and this is with the exact same drive, with USB 2 I was able to get a little bit less than about 30 megabytes per second read and write time. When I hooked it up via FireWire, I was able to get 56 megabytes per second write and 62 megabytes per second read time. And when I hooked it up with an ExpressCard 34 USB 3.0 slot, I was actually able to get almost 90 megabytes per second write and read time. This is really surprising that the MacBook Air comes with a USB 3 chipset that isn't as fast as an older, even over a year older MacBook Pro that doesn't come with USB 3. We're going to do a little speed test here and compare the video processing power of the MacBook Air with a MacBook Pro with a 2.3 GHz quad-core i7 processor. So we're exporting these two iMovie projects, both located on a solid-state drive, both being exported to a solid-state drive, but the solid-state drive on the MacBook Air is actually faster, it's SATA 3, whereas the solid-state drive on this MacBook Pro is only SATA 2. So we're going to take a look and see exactly how long each of these videos take to encode, and then see exactly how they look once they're finished being processed, and see which one works out better. This is to see if you could use a MacBook Air as a MacBook Pro replacement, assuming you do lots of hardcore video editing and video transcoding work. Something you'll notice here is that the MacBook Pro, while it's going a good bit faster than the MacBook Air, is very loud with its fans. The fans in the middle of the process were almost revved all the way up to full speed, and the MacBook Air on the other hand is almost silent. It's crazy how quiet this thing is. It sounds like the MacBook Pro is ramping up its fans again right now. So the MacBook Pro is done at right about 5.5 minutes. Now the MacBook Air is finished exporting the movie. Took just about 6.5 minutes for the MacBook Air to export that. So it's actually really relatively close times to export. You're not going to be losing too much speed going with a MacBook Air versus a MacBook Pro when you're doing iMovie exports. If you take a look at the playback of each of the videos, you'll notice that the MacBook Air's video is a tad bit jerky. It looks kind of like a cell phone video almost. It's just not as smooth as the video produced by the MacBook Pro. So let's zoom in a little bit and kind of question if this has anything to do with the discrete graphics chip, the AMD Radeon 6750M that's inside the MacBook Pro, and the lack of said graphics chip, only relying on the Intel HD 4000 inside the MacBook Air. The next big question is, how does the screen compare on the MacBook Air to its big brother, the 17-inch MacBook Pro with an anti-glare display? The screen is surprisingly very nice. This actually is a Samsung panel, which if you've read anything about this, Samsung makes better panels than LG does for the MacBook Air. So it's very nice that there's a Samsung panel on here. It's very rich color, nice display. I've used an LG panel and it actually looks a bit washed out, so this is really nice, the Samsung display. But if you take a look at the anti-glare 17-inch MacBook Pro, you can see that it's just the lack of glare is instantly noticeable. You can see the window in the left display and just a bit of a brighter area on the screen in the right display when there's glare. It really evenly spreads it out. It's much easier to work with for long periods of time, and it definitely disperses the glare and even makes it a non-issue. If you want to take a closer look at text, you can see that text renders really well on the anti-glare. It's just really easy to look at and read. And when you're taking a look at the glossy display, text is still quite good. It's not as pixel dense as the 17-inch, but it is very nice and it looks great. So they're both great displays, and I would definitely suggest you check if you got a MacBook Air, whether it is an LG or a Samsung display. But overall, for the size that you're getting and the portability, it's really a great display. Scrolling between desktops, you'll notice that the MacBook Pro finishes scrolling before the MacBook Air can. So this is just a little personal preference of mine. I like being able to scroll quickly between desktops, and the MacBook Air is just not able to keep up with the fluidity of the MacBook Pro. It is a couple milliseconds, so it's definitely a first world problem. This really is a solid machine. The only downsides to this are the speakers are not as good as you can get with a MacBook Pro, and the external peripherals don't perform up to par with its bigger brothers, such as USB 3. This could really be a solid competitor for your next computer.